Hi everyone and welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news and analysis from a Taiwan perspective. I'm Gladys Lee.
I'm Rath Wang.
Crushing red waivers didn't happen as President Joe Biden gave his speech on Wednesday after the midterm election closed. And it was a good day for democracy, he said. Are we looking for a divided government in near future in the United States? As many races in the U.S. midterm elections are too close to call, with many key seats still up for grabs, we examine what implications a mixed Congress could mean for U.S. policy towards Taiwan and the world, as absentee ballots continue to be counted. So today at the show, joining us, we have two professionals join with us. First, we'd like to introduce you Professor Tso Chen-dong, Professor of Political Science at National Taiwan University, who also former Kuomintang Mainland Affairs Department Director, and also he is an expert in Taiwan-U.S.-China relations. Second, we would like to introduce you Guo Chenlung, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of United Daily News, one of Taiwan's largest newspaper, who is also an expert in international relations.
I spoke earlier to Marco Rubio, U.S. Republican Senator from the state of Florida in Washington, D.C. Senator Rubio is a longtime ally of Taiwan, having sponsored and voted for many of Taiwan-friendly legislation. And I also spoke to John Eastwood, the chair of Democrats Abroad Taiwan. Democrats Abroad is the overseas arm of the U.S. Democratic Party. John is currently in the U.S. observing the midterm elections alongside Democratic leadership. Let's first start off today's discussion with the current vote count and the prospects of which party will win the Senate, the House of Representatives, and key governor races. Professor, my first question goes to you. It has been widely said that Republicans would just need one seat to win a Democrat incumbent to take over the Senate. To much surprise, it appears that the Democrats have successfully won Pennsylvania with the victory of John Fetterman in taking over that incumbent Republican seat. How do you believe other remaining toss-up seats will fare? We still see too close to call in Nevada, in Arizona, and Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia is a special case. At the moment, Georgia is going to have a runoff election on December 6th. So whether that, which party that seat of Senate will go will to be decided on December 6th. But Nevada is an interesting case because the two contenders, one is Catherine Mastro. She is incumbent. She has been quite extraordinary in the sense that she is the first Latino getting into Senate, and she has a very good career record as Attorney General of Nevada State. However, she faces strong competition from the challenger, who is Adam Laxalt. Mr. Laxalt is a unique person because he comes from a political family. His grandfather was governor of Nevada, and his father is a senator. So he's very powerful, and at the moment, it seems that Mr. Laxalt is taking the lead. But the gap is very narrow. It's about 2%. So how it will come out is still unknown. But we know that Nevada has a special counting rule because the major political parties, especially the Republican, does not trust the electronic counting system. So it has to do hand counting, and that's
so you're saying the advantage is with the Democrats because these mail-in ballots actually favor the Democrats in this election.
And that's possible. That's possible, but it's still to be seen because, as I said, at this point, Miss Catherine Mastro, seems to face an uphill battle.
If she loses this seat, do you feel that the Republicans could indeed take over the Senate?
Not yet, because as far as I know, Arizona, the state of Arizona, the seat has already is going to go to Democrats. So that's the undecided seat last night. So if that seat goes to Democrat and then Georgia goes to Democrat, then Democrat still has the chance to control Senate. And the two contenders in Georgia is quite interesting because the incumbent is a pastor and he is quite famous in joining the campaign for Obamacare, and he made a very outstanding campaign in 2020 to win the seat. So, and he is actually the first black person to get into Senate from a Confederate state.
Right.
Professor, I wanted to follow up on the current latest trends, that it seems that the tides have changed. As Gladys mentioned, that the red wave may be waning and that the Democrats could perhaps even take over the Senate and retain the Senate. So with this in mind, do you feel that the Republicans could still take measures that will distract and obstruct President Biden's actions in terms of administration, in terms of pushing policy?
Okay, well, that's going to be a big story. But at this point, I will say that, look, the runoff election in Georgia will be taking place a month from now. So how the public feel is unknown yet. So we have to see at that time the general atmosphere would be. In addition, there are a number of commentators have already speaking out, saying that it's not a red wave, it's a red ripple. So the impact is not as severe as people expect before the midterm
I see
election.
you laughing, Chenlung. Do you feel that there might be some sort of opposition, or could that stop obstruction, say, from the Republican Party, or distraction?
Republicans have been saying that it's going to be a red wave. Even some are saying it's a red tsunami. But we are seeing that in the Senate, maybe the Democrats still going to hold its majority. Not even majority, even if it's a 50-50, the vice president still break the tie.
Right.
And also that in the House, it's only about 30 seats apart. I mean, in the case of Clinton, it's like 52 seats. In the case of Obama, it's 62. So the margin is very wide in terms for the new president in his first midterm, they always lose. But now Biden's only lose for about 30 seats. People are consider it's a win for Democrat even. So I would say that the whole campaign, I think both sides had made mistakes. At first, Biden and the Democrat were thought that because the Supreme Court had the Roe versus Wade overturned, that it's possible to mobilize the women's vote in order for them to support for the pro-choice. But later on, it was the economy factor, such as inflation and the worry for the recession for next years, that captured the whole scene. And now we're seeing more and more support on the Republican. But on the third stage, especially at the last week, we find that that the White House and President Biden is coming all force, calling for it's going to be a vote for democracy. Meaning that if you vote for Republican, Trump will be coming back and run for 2024. And we're going to see there's a civil war going on in the United States. So that kind of campaign, plus Obama is bringing the old two former President Clinton, President Obama, all joining this hand. And I think also the Republican realized that it's better to not let Trump to come out and announce his candidacy for 2024 before the election. That would be a bad idea. So they try to persuade Trump to postpone that until after the election, try to limit the damage that he had caused. So I think that's the general picture.
It's great how we talk about Trump and how there seems to be less support now given that Trump's candidates has kind of waned in that sense. But in terms of going back to practicality, if the Republicans are not able to gain a majority, do you feel that from an administrative point of view, will that obstruct Biden's agenda or what he can do in the next 2 years?
If both House and the Senate, if one of them belong to the Republican, that will successfully block Biden's agenda, of course, because you need to have two House, two Parliament in order to approve all the legislation. Especially, I would like to put is the budget. I would say that because now Republicans want to hold so-called the debt ceiling as a bargaining leverage for any of the budget items that they have in mind. So it's going to be pretty ugly. I mean, if we are going to see a divided government, that the federal government agency is not going to have money to operate, and there's a closure everywhere, and that would be a terrible scene.
But the other irony is that the Republicans, if you look at the numbers, they actually spend more when they're in office, and the Democrats have more of a responsible way of spending. What would you say to that, Professor?
I think they have different philosophy of governing. Republicans tend to argue that small government is better than big government. However, they place emphasis on defense spending. And so that's why you see a spending surge when a Republican is in office.
And that's likely to continue with them if Republicans support and they'll push in Congress.
That's very possible.
Would you consider Democrat as a win for the results so far as we predicted?
Some would say that it's not losing as much as people have expected.
Right.
So you can see that President Biden come up this morning and said that they have a win. But
he said it was a good day, right?
As
a victory.
But there's still doubt about it, especially later on we're going to see that the Republican is not only going to hold the budget as hostage, but also they're going to launch their own investigation on a lot of failed policy of Biden, such as the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, such as want to search the Trump's residence in Florida. And also, I think one of the big thing will happen is their investigation on Hunter Biden's scandal, both in China and in Ukraine.
Right. As we can see that actually before the election, media and people are predicted that the administration are going to lose both the House and Senate. But it turns out it didn't happen.
Right.
Actually, historically speaking, it should. Right? So how would you respond to that?
So far, we haven't seen the final result yet.
Right.
But now the House seems to be become a Republican majority, I would say. But
the Senate.
But the Senate still is held on by the Democrat. I mean, the last time I saw is 48 seats to 48 seats, and now the Democrat only want to have one more seat, and they can wait until December to see what's the result of Georgia. By 50 seats, they can win. I mean, this is quite favorable for Democrat right now.
How about you, Professor? From your perspective, for President Biden's low record approval ratings, people are seeing that mainly voters are going to punish the administration. But how do you see about that?
Well, definitely Trump plays a major role in that. I think Trump has still fears among many voters with regard to his transactional diplomacy, with regard to his hateful speech. I think that draws many voters to come out and to vote for Democrats.
Right.
And also, I think the tactics played by the Biden administration also pays off. We see that Biden seems to criticize Trump a lot during the campaign trail, and also Obama and also Clinton. I think both of the former presidents play a key role in weakening the general public with regard to the importance of performance.
Right.
So as they argued, Trump and the Republican in general can steer your fear, but cannot solve the problem. And we need someone to fix it. We need someone to take the government to take the country forward, and that's the message that really matters.
It's interesting you talked about performance because a lot of Americans, or if you look at the polls, they say the majority of Americans, their number one issue is on inflation and the economy, and it seems they do not agree with Biden on that. And the second issue, as Chenlung mentioned earlier, is on abortion or other social issues. Right. So how does that play in here? If you mentioned that the government is probably doing a good job, that Biden's messaging is doing okay, but they're not voting for Trump. How do you reconcile that paradox?
Okay, as I said, because Democrats argue that there is no solution provided by the Republican, and you cannot see any specific measures that is suggested from the Republican platform. And also, the Biden administration has passed several important legislations, including the CHIP bill and also the Inflation Reduction Bill. I think this is a good record for President Biden. And also, we have to look at the job record. The job performance, the administration's performance in terms of job creation is quite good, and so far, the number of jobs created at this point is already exceeding the number of jobs lost during the initial stage of the pandemic. So I think that helps Biden a lot.
That's interesting. Actually, we've examined these results so far. Actually, Trump supporters are not performing that well as expected. We will come back to that. So we actually have a sound out from a senator that's here.
We just discussed the American political situation as the midterm election votes continue to be counted and what it will look like in the scenario where full Congress goes to neither party. Let's now take a look at Marco Rubio's victory speech. Rubio is a longtime ally of Taiwan and was successfully re-elected as a Republican senator from Florida. A large part of his campaign was about the economy and strong stance on China.
One of the things I'm proudest of in the Senate, look, we've passed as many or more bills than anybody else, important bills. Every major bill in America that's taken on China, for example, in the last 4 years have been mine. The Chinese government doesn't like me. They've banned me. They sanctioned me. We had to cancel our vacation to Wuhan because they don't like me.
That was Marco Rubio's strong words on China. I also spoke to him in Washington, D.C. earlier on why Taiwan is so important to the U.S. as well as to the world. Rubio also talks about America's greatest challenge of the 21st century. Let's take a look.
For years, America and Taiwan have worked together to maintain stability and freedom in the Indo-Pacific. Our shared respect for personal liberty and fundamental rights form the basis of our historical and steadfast friendship. Today, the Chinese Communist Party seeks to expand its international influence at the expense of free peoples around the world, especially Taiwan, whom they seek to dominate by force if necessary. So let me be clear, if that happens, it will have economic, political, and strategic consequences for generations of Americans. That makes the U.S. Taiwan relationship, frankly, more important than ever. Countering Beijing's aggression towards Taiwan must remain one of our top priorities in foreign policy here in Washington.
So you just heard from Senator Marco Rubio speaking to Rep in Washington, D.C. earlier this year, and he spoke about how Taiwan is so important to the U.S. and the need to support the country against the world's #1 threat and challenge, that is China. So let's now discuss the U.S. strong stance on China and with the boost in Republican support, how that will pan out and what that means for Taiwan. So Chenlung, actually we would like to discuss further about the anti-China phenomenon this year throughout the midterm election. How do you have your expectations or some implications about that?
I think with Republican now controlling the House, there's going to be more and more tough measure put out toward China. For one thing, they're going to relaunch the investigation of the Wuhan or the coronavirus origin of it. And this is something that I think Beijing would not like to see. And another thing is another version of Taiwan Policy Act might come up. So far, this year, Taiwan Policy Act is pretty much, I think, will die by the end of this year. But some of the clause may put in the Defense Authorization Act in the future. And if there's going to be a tough measure coming out from the Republican, there's two possibilities. Whether the Democrat would try to slow it down and to modify it, or another possibility is if the competition become heat up, maybe the Democrat would join on board and to become tougher on China to show that they are really the party that can be earning results out of China. I think that's two of the possibilities, still wait to be seen what will happen. But I think the immediate effect will be on the summit, the possible summit between Biden and Xi Jinping next week. Yeah. And how would China deal with this kind of new conditions in the future? I think that would be a headache for Xi Jinping.
Are we expecting a stronger Biden administration in the coming 2 years?
Yes, I think if we are seeing the state leader when they are playing a two-level game, on the one hand, they have to deal with domestic, and the other, he have to deal with international level. So I think Biden would be concerned about what he's going to get the criticism from domestic environment, so he will be tough on dealing with China. On the other hand, I think Xi Jinping is now have more latitude for reaching a compromise, since he had become so consolidated in his power domestically. He have no worry that there's going to be any criticism from China anymore. So I think that is probably a good sign. We'll see that maybe China and the United States can reach some compromise. It's a good thing that we see that China has sent out Jie Zhenhua to go to the COP27 summit. And that is a way China showed that China is willing to cooperate with the United States in terms of climate change.
Right, right.
In terms of Republicans being hard on China, there are also elements in the party, such as Mitch McConnell, his wife Elaine Chao, who have deep business ties with China. How would you see that play in, given that the business ties and commercial ties have always been a large pillar of the Republican Party?
Republican Party have a long relationship with business community. That had been, it's kind of one of their constitutions of it. And this is the part I don't think that Republican Party would try to ignore. But on the other hand, you are seeing there's a new component in the Republican Party which is brought in by Donald Trump, meaning that we are the party who better can protect American jobs, and we can better help American economy. And that is something used to be good at by the Democrat, but now it seems that Republicans have captured that part also. I think that is a genuine crisis for the Democrat.
You're saying the tides have twisted from being protectionist, from Democrats being traditionally protectionist,
right,
and now the Republicans are being
right. In the old days, before 2016, or the Rust Bill, or the Iron Bill, we call it, they are the die-hard Democrat supporters. But you see that in the 2016 election, all of them had turned into supporting Donald Trump. I think that is the concern why even during 2016, when Hillary Clinton was running on the Democrat platform, he is saying that, okay, we are not going to join TPP. It's exactly because of this kind of afraid that once I sign the TPP, that may losing more jobs. So I think now even President Biden had decided not to launch any multilateral trade agreement by reducing the tariff. Now it's only other kinds of economic cooperation that is without this concern of losing American jobs.
So would this complicate things for Taiwan? Perhaps this is for Professor. Would this complicate things for the discussions that are going on with Taiwan, with 21st trade, talks and all that? Will this diminish Taiwan's chance to have an FTA with the U.S., given that Republican support, even though we say it's waning, it's still significant?
I think this is, there are two sides of the same coin. On the one side, we see Republican advocating for stronger support for Taiwan. So anything that supports Taiwan is good. So in that sense, Republicans should support the U.S. Taiwan 21st century trade, U.S. Taiwan initiative for 21st century trade. However, the other side of the same coin is that a Republican is now turning more and more protectionist. So they would ask for more scrutiny over any possible trade deal. I think
scrutiny would mean more concessions from Taiwan, or do you feel it's scrutiny in terms of what the U.S. will dictate in terms of
first
terms?
of all, it has to do with the procedural issue. So any trade deal has to pass the Congress. The Biden administration now use words such as the framework or initiative, which is not a formal agreement that requires congressional consent. But now with Republican taking majority, these new members of the Congress may ask the administration to put this bill into the Congress.
So in other words, it's complicating things for Biden.
That's right. That's
but you
right.
mentioned earlier about how Republicans have a focus on defense. So will you see that aspect increase? Will they pressure the Biden administration to provide more arms or to do more in terms of Taiwan's defense?
In terms of arms sale, the role played by the Congress is quite limited. According to American law, the president has to notify the Congress 30 days ahead of any final step taken to conclude an arms sale contract. So Congress does have the role to play in receiving that notification and in voice out their opinion. However, according to the same law, Congress can adopt a joint resolution to block an arms sale, but cannot propose an arms sale. So the role does not allow the Congress to play any role to push forward arms sale, but their role can only allow the Congress to stop arms sale.
So they can obstruct, but they can't actually
That's right,
initiate.
that's right. But what they can do is to put a recommendation in law they pass to suggest to the administration to have more arms sale to Taiwan. That's one thing they can do.
But they could have more legislation, like say the Taiwan Policy Act that Chenlung mentioned earlier, or other legislation that could promote or pressure the administration to do more in terms of defense.
For example, the Taiwan Policy Act contains clauses to require the administration to provide security assistance, which means that the administration will provide funding for Taiwan to buy defense equipment from the United States.
So would you see more of that happening? As we've seen in the past, a lot of, or say the majority of Taiwan-related legislation was actually proposed by Republicans.
Yeah, that's right. But what I'm going to say is that that does not touch upon specific items of defense equipment. So another thing the Congress can do is to push forward the administration to have a faster, speedy delivery of arms already purchased by Taiwan. And that's a problem Taiwan now faces, because many items that Taiwan purchases is now in delay for delivery. The reason for that is because America is supporting Ukraine, and so many of the items that's supposed to go to Taiwan now go to Ukraine. So, for example, Michael McCone, the lead member of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the House introduced a bill in July to ask the administration to speed up the delivery of defense equipment to Taiwan, which Taiwan has already purchased.
So you're saying it's delayed because of Ukraine, because of what's provided to Ukraine. It's great you mentioned Ukraine, and this question is for Chenlung. In terms of Ukraine, we've seen mixed support. Republicans in general do seem to support Ukraine, but there's also a big wave of their fundamental support base, which comes from a lot of the extreme Christian elements, which believe that Putin's invasion is actually a crusade on stopping Western liberal values and preserving conservative values. How do you see that pan out? Because there seems to be unanimous support on being anti-China, but there's not unanimous support on Ukraine. And would that force Biden to broker a peace deal with Putin and Zelensky?
One of the major impacts this midterm election have on foreign policy, especially will be on Ukraine. I think the incoming Speaker of the House, McCarthy, mentioned that given that so many Americans is living under the threat of economic recession, the United States cannot afford to give a blank check to Ukraine. I think that really terrified the Ukraine government. I think so far the United States have provided 18 billion of military aid to Ukraine. That's exactly the reason why Ukraine can resist Russian invasion and now even have an upper hand nowadays. I think one of the things that Republican is mentioning about scale down the aid to Ukraine have something to do with the political dimension of it. Because if you still remember, during Trump rule, Trump is also withholding the aid to Ukraine in order to exchange the Ukraine government. It was the President Zelensky at the time to turn in some of the information that is disadvantageous for President, at the time, former Vice President Biden and his son. So if eventually that the Congress is going to launch an investigation on Biden and his son, then that would be the leverage Republican can put on the Ukraine government to turn in some of the information is not going to be very constructive for the Biden administration.
So you don't see them pushing for a ceasefire? You don't see them pushing the U.S. to withdraw support?
That's another possibility I'm seeing, because there's also a signed letter by there's about 30 of the Democrats who is very progressive. They are asking the Biden administration, saying that so far Biden policy on Ukraine is that it's for the Ukraine government to decide whether they want to have negotiation with Russia or not. But they are saying that we have put in so many effort already in the Ukraine support operation. How come the U.S. have no say in here? And they are demanding that maybe United States should have a direct negotiation with Russia as well. I think that's the pressure is also coming from the extreme left of the Democrat Party.
We just spoke about how the midterm election results could affect U.S. foreign policy, including policy towards Taiwan. Let's now take a look at John Eastwood, the chair of Democrats Abroad Taiwan. Democrats Abroad is the overseas arm of the U.S. Democratic Party. John is currently in the U.S. observing the midterm elections alongside Democratic leadership. He speaks about what the results so far mean for Trumpism, Taiwan, and the economy. Let's take a look.
Trumpism it seems to be a bit of a dead end. I mean, now all these candidates that he was supporting for the current midterm elections didn't do so well. The fact that the primary process in the Republican Party led to a whole lot of people embracing Trump, and Trumpism led to a much more extreme faction of the party being run up against fairly middle of the road Democrats. And I think the effect of Trumpism of course, is a view in which the ability to work across the aisle it simply doesn't happen. You have an entire party which is beholden to the concept of whatever the Democrats say, I'm going to do the opposite, no matter how normally such a position,
Feel that with, the results coming in, has that support for Trumpism waned a bit, and will his influence slowly diminish?
I think it's absolutely incredible. I mean, you look around the country and the results coming back in from the elections are so strong, repudiation of the concept of a red wave. I mean, it's just, from a Democratic perspective, holding the line or, only having minor losses in a normal midterm election is crazy good. So this is a massive repudiation of the Trump legacy.
What does this mean for Taiwan?
Well, in terms of Taiwan, the most important thing that you want is stability in terms of the policy. And traditionally, the Democrats and the Republicans on both sides of the aisle, they would be able to agree that protecting Taiwan was a good thing. And we saw in recent months, as Biden would make a statement about protecting Taiwan against military aggression, there were actually Republican candidates who were jumping out to say, he's crazy for saying it. That's not normal. So I think what we see in this election is hopefully the Republicans next time around will have a more sane crop. The effects of Trumpism will wane, and Taiwan will be the beneficiary of having candidates on both sides who are more normal. Now, actually, the candidates this time around for the Democrats are the middle of the road, pretty sane, usual ones. It's the Republicans that somehow, through Trumpism, have put forth a bunch of these loons.
What about in terms of the economy? Do you feel that this is a referendum of the Biden administration, or do you feel that things aren't actually as bad as many say?
The economy in the United States has fundamentally changed. Now, during this last week while I've been in the United States, it's amazing to see just how many retail stores have been shuttered, how restaurants have changed, how a lot of things in the economy have changed through COVID and through. But from a larger perspective, it's pretty clear that Americans understand that the president doesn't control inflation. There's some economic issues which have been going on for a long time. The United States has had a very long period of prosperity. And so in terms of that, I think the voters are rejecting the notion that the economy is tied to one president.
You just heard from John Eastwood, Democrats Abroad Taiwan chair, and he talks about Trump's declining influence and long-term prospects for Taiwan and current state of the economy. And of course, he mentioned about how instabilities from the Trump before when he took the office. And then the question was about how this time, as we can see, Trump-backed candidates are likely to lose their elections. Let's see, Pennsylvania, Michigan, even in Arizona, or we're not sure about Georgia. How would you see, Professor, to see this phenomenon so far that Trump-backed candidates are losing their election?
I read a column. Actually, it's an editorial column by New York Times on the eve of the election. It says that it's a time to defend democracy, and in fact, the same message comes from Biden himself, arguing that the democracy may fade away if the results goes badly. So I think what's really what really get people going out to vote is actually a fear that Trump may come back, okay, and a fear that the Trump-backed candidates may actually rule the democratic institution, such as the vote counting system. Mm-hmm. So you see that the Democrats win a lot in positions like the state Secretary of State.
Yeah.
the state level Secretary of State, or even the Attorney General at the state level. So because these are the key positions to monitor the vote counting process, and they are afraid that what happens in 2021 could repeat again in 2024.
Would you say this result will affect next week when Trump is highly expected to announcing his re-election in 2024? Would you say that? Would you see this effect?
Now there is a rumor that Trump may postpone his announcement. Some of his advisors recommend him to do that until December 6th, after the Senate seat of Georgia is decided. Mm-hmm. So we have to wait and see.
How about you, Chenlung? You have something to add on?
So far, people had counted, there's totally 14 candidates lost, backed by Trump in these elections. So that's a lot. But there's one prominent who got re-elected in Florida, who is DeSantis. DeSantis is now a strong future candidate for 2024 Republican Party. I think now there's more and more people willing to support DeSantis in order to replace Trump in the coming 2024 elections. They are hoping to see someone is young, someone is gentleman-like, instead of like Trump is criticizing and scoring a lot of people and offending a lot of people, actually.
And not to mention some hatred, right?
Right, hatred words. And if there's a new generation of Republican candidate, I think also that will affect Biden's candidacy in the next presidential elections. People inside the Democratic Party are saying that Biden is too old, he don't have enough energy. Sometimes he wasn't sure about his own mind. I think these are the genuine criticisms of Biden. But if Trump becomes the candidate, then it must be Biden, since he had beaten him before. So I think those two candidacy are interlinked together, right?
And it's interesting if we see China's reaction. So far, we haven't heard too much information from how the Xi Jinping administration responds to the election. How would you say about that?
I think the first reaction will come out when China announces whether there's going to be a summit between Xi Jinping and Biden. If they announce there's going to be a summit, meaning that they have already, on the staff level, they have already arranged some issues that can be reach a consensus during the summit. And that would mean that actually Xi Jinping is, after long thought, they would consider it would be better for him to support Biden and Democrat at this moment, right?
How about you, Professor, from your understanding of China, and would you see there would be stronger pressure on Xi's side or actually from Biden's administration side?
With regard to the
new election result?
Well, definitely Biden will face a lot more pressure, given that he will see a divided government under his auspice. But also, I think that could be a leverage if he plays it well. Right. I agree with what Chenlung said earlier, that Xi now has more room to make compromise, whereas Biden has not. So there is a possibility that Xi could offer something for Biden to take home. However, Biden has also to provide something to give Xi a strong reason to do that. So then along that line, I would say Taiwan is the focus. Xi probably would agree to sacrifice many things just for the price of Taiwan.
But there seems to be bipartisan support, and the Republicans are strongly adamant on protecting Taiwan, arming Taiwan. How do you see Biden having that room to discuss Taiwan?
I think even though there is a bipartisan support for Taiwan, but there is still a debate with regard to what Taiwan really needs in terms of the real protection that Taiwan demands.
So what demands do you think Xi could come out with in regards to Taiwan?
I think this is a hypothetical question at the moment, but I think I would like to go back to the debate in America. Basically, there is a symbolic support, such as renaming the Taipei representative office in America. There is also the substantial things such as more arms sale, or even the joint production of defense equipment. I think you can divide these two, and the Republican would like to do both, whereas Democrat could probably just focus on one of them.
On the substance.
On the substance, right.
So you feel that with that, he probably could have some concessions in terms of what would be seen as losing of China's face?
Yeah, that's right. That creates some room for compromise. Yeah.
And speaking of Taiwan, actually, we see some Chinese descent candidates this time in the U.S. midterm. Do you see that will bring up Taiwan's visibility in the U.S. politicians' area, or actually they are actually just born and raised in the U.S.? What do you see about that?
I think the candidacy candidate or the congressman that has been with the Taiwan upbringing sometimes will be very sensitive not to put themselves in an ethnicity box. I mean, right. So in that sense, I would say that Taiwan is better to be supported by every congressman in the United States rather than specifically by the congressman or congresswoman who was born in Taiwan or their parents are from Taiwan.
But would heritage and understanding of Taiwan bring that visibility to the U.S. public? Do you feel that that could help raise Taiwan's profile? Not in terms of who we pick, but in terms of expanding.
Or actually, if we're talking about awareness. Asian, right? Because there is a lot of discussion about Latinos' visibility, but how about Asians' visibility?
I think one of the things is that I always focus on is that the bill and the proposal that is being raised in the Congress should be something genuine for Taiwan, not something against China that indirectly can be interpreted as good for Taiwan. I think that's a totally different thing. We are seeing more bill proposals these days are more against China rather than for Taiwan. I think that's not really helpful.
But if you look at the Taiwan Policy Act, a lot of analysts say that it's actually for Taiwan because these demands have been what a lot of Taiwanese advocacies have been advocating for, say, 3-4 decades. And it's all put into this one thing. How would you argue to that?